The old clock in the grand foyer struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through the empty halls of Ashford House. The once stately mansion, with its dust-laden carpets and faded grandeur, seemed to hold its breath, as if bracing for something unseen. Sarah Whitmore, standing beneath the flickering light of a crystal chandelier, felt the oppressive weight of the mansion's silence settle over her like a shroud. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and ancient wood, mingling with the faint tang of something metallic. Her gaze fell upon the antique mirror that dominated the hallway. It was an elaborate piece, its gilded frame tarnished by time and neglect, the glass surface showing subtle distortions in the dim light. The mirror had been one of the few things that had captivated her attention amidst the mansion's disarray. Its beauty was undeniable, but it carried an unsettling presence, as though it were more than just a reflection of the past. Sarah's fingers brushed against the ornate frame, tracing the intricate carvings. The mirror had come with the mansion, a relic from a bygone era when Ashford House had been a place of vibrant gatherings and lively conversations. Now it stood as a solitary sentinel in the darkened hallway, its reflective surface seeming to pulse with a life of its own. It was in these early moments of settling in that Sarah first noticed the peculiarities. The mirror's reflection seemed to lag slightly behind her movements, as if it were a step out of sync with reality. At first, she attributed it to the old glass and the dim lighting, but as the days wore on, the discrepancies grew more pronounced. The mirror's reflections began to show disturbing, eerie movements, shadows that lingered longer than they should, and figures that seemed to twist and writhe in ways that defied logic. Sarah's fascination with the mansion's history had led her to explore its many rooms, uncovering dusty tomes and faded photographs. It was during these explorations that she learned of the mansion's dark past, tales of eccentric relatives, unexplained disappearances, and whispered rumors of occult practices. Yet, it was the mirror's own history that seemed to hold the key to the growing terror she felt. One evening, as a storm battered the mansion with driving rain and howling winds, Sarah found herself drawn to the mirror once more. She stood before it, her reflection wavering in the flickering candlelight. The whispers began then, soft, almost imperceptible at first, but growing louder as she watched. The mirror's surface rippled, distorting her image and casting shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent intent. "I know you're here," Sarah said aloud, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Show yourself." The reflection in the mirror shifted. Sarah saw not only herself, but an unfamiliar figure. An old woman with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, her hands pressed against the glass, as if trying to reach through. The figure's eyes locked with Sarah's, and a chill ran down her spine. The old woman's mouth moved, forming words that Sarah could not hear, but felt in her bones. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah delved into the mansion's history with renewed vigor. She found old journals and letters hidden within the walls, revealing a series of tragic events linked to the mirror. It was said that the mirror had been a focus of dark rituals performed by a previous occupant, an occultist who had attempted to harness its power to commune with entities from beyond. As Sarah pieced together the history, she began to experience more intense manifestations. The mirror's reflections grew more violent, showing scenes of torment and suffering that seemed to bleed into her reality. Objects in the mansion moved on their own, and the whispers grew into a cacophony of anguished voices. One night, Sarah was drawn to the mirror by a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. The reflection showed a distorted version of herself, surrounded by shadowy figures that seemed to reach out with clawed hands. The mirror's surface darkened, and the oppressive presence of the mirror shade became palpable. The entity's voice, cold and malevolent, filled the room. "Release me," it whispered. "I have been trapped for too long." Sarah's heart raced as she realized that the mirror shade was not just a presence, but a powerful, malevolent force seeking to break free from its confines. She knew she had to act quickly to prevent the entity from manifesting fully into the real world. Drawing on her knowledge of the mirror's history and the occult rituals described in the journals, Sarah performed a series of protective rites and attempts to banish the entity. The confrontation with the mirror shade was both physical and psychological, as the entity twisted her fears and insecurities to weaken her resolve. The final showdown occurred in the grand hallway, where Sarah faced the mirror's reflection one last time. The air was thick with tension, and the mansion seemed to pulse with a dark energy. As Sarah chanted the final incantations, the mirror's surface cracked and shattered, the reflections turning chaotic and distorted. The mirror shade's furious cries echoed through the mansion, and Sarah felt a surge of fear and exhilaration as the entity's presence was finally torn from reality. In the aftermath, the mansion fell silent once more. The mirror lay in shards on the floor, its dark influence broken. Sarah stood among the ruins, exhausted but triumphant. The mansion's oppressive atmosphere lifted, and a sense of peace settled over Ashford House. Sarah's experience with the mirror had left her forever changed. The mansion was no longer just a relic of the past, but a symbol of her own journey through darkness and redemption. As she looked out into the dawn of a new day, she knew that she had faced her fears and emerged stronger, having confronted the echoing glass that had threatened to consume her very soul. James Aldridge stood alone in his high-rise apartment, the city lights below twinkling like a sea of stars. The expansive glass wall offered a panoramic view of Zenith Heights, a stark contrast to the unsettling feelings that had begun to plague him. The apartment, with its sleek, modern design, was intended to be a fresh start, a sanctuary from the chaos of his past. Yet, as James surveyed the room, he couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. It began subtly. The reflection in the glass wall would occasionally lag behind his movements, a disorienting delay that James initially dismissed as a trick of the light. But over time, the discrepancies grew more pronounced. His reflection began to exhibit disturbing gestures, hands that moved on their own, eyes that followed him with a disquieting intensity. One evening, as James prepared dinner in the sleek, minimalist kitchen, he noticed a particularly unsettling change. His reflection in the glass wall was not mimicking his actions. Instead, it was performing its own erratic movements. The figure in the glass seemed to reach out, its gestures becoming increasingly frantic and desperate. "Something's not right," James muttered to himself, a shiver running down his spine. He reached out to touch the glass, but the reflection remained unnervingly detached. Determined to find an explanation, James began investigating the apartment's history. His search led him to a series of unsettling discoveries about the previous owner, Evelyn Whitaker, a wealthy socialite who had vanished mysteriously several years prior. The more James learned about Evelyn, the more he became convinced that her disappearance was connected to the malevolent force he now faced. Local records revealed that Evelyn had been involved in a series of high-profile disputes and scandals. Her final months were marked by erratic behavior and increasing paranoia. Rumors swirled about her involvement in occult practices, and her disappearance had never been satisfactorily explained. James's investigation took him to the office of a local historian, Dr. Lydia Hart, who specialized in the city's darker legends. Dr. Hart revealed that Evelyn's disappearance was linked to a series of tragic events involving her family and associates, suggesting that her spirit might still linger in the apartment, trapped by unresolved issues and a powerful, vengeful force. As James delved deeper, the manifestations in the glass wall grew more violent. The Phantom Pane seemed to be communicating its anger and despair through increasingly disturbing reflections. Images of Evelyn's final moments, glimpses of shadowy figures, and cryptic messages written in what appeared to be blood. One night, the situation reached a breaking point. James was jolted awake by a series of harsh, discordant sounds coming from the glass wall. The reflections had become a nightmarish tableau of violence and torment, with the Phantom Pane's malevolent presence pressing against the barrier of reality. In a desperate attempt to confront the entity, James performed a series of rituals he had learned from Dr. Hart's research. He recited ancient incantations and used protective symbols to try and banish the Phantom Pane from the glass. The apartment was filled with an oppressive energy, and the glass wall seemed to writhe and pulse with a dark, unsettling force. The final confrontation was a chaotic blend of terror and revelation. The Phantom Pane's reflections became a swirling vortex of rage and sorrow, the glass wall shattering under the weight of the entity's fury. As the force of the Phantom Pane was finally expelled, James was left standing amidst the ruins of the glass wall, exhausted but resolute. In the aftermath, the apartment felt different, lighter, as if the oppressive weight of the Phantom Pane had been lifted. James knew that the battle was over, but the experience had left an indelible mark on him. The sleek, modern high-rise had become a symbol of his struggle against a malevolent force, a reminder of the fragile boundary between reality and the supernatural. As James looked out over the city from the remaining windows, he felt a sense of uneasy peace. The Phantom Pane was gone, but the echoes of its presence lingered in the glass, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume him. Elena Marlowe's new art studio was a haven of faded elegance amidst the decay of Viridian Heights. The building, with its towering windows and intricate moldings, offered a glimpse of the neighborhood's once glorious past. Elena had fallen in love with the place immediately, enchanted by its potential as a canvas for her artistic revival. Yet there was one feature she couldn't ignore: the large, cracked window in the studio's back room. The window was a relic of an earlier time, its glass marred by years of neglect. Elena, driven by a blend of artistic curiosity and determination, decided to restore it. She spent hours scrubbing away the grime, carefully repairing the fractures and polishing the surface until it gleamed. As the final pieces of dust were wiped away, Elena felt a sense of accomplishment, unaware of the malevolent presence she had just awakened. At first, everything seemed normal. Elena admired her reflection in the newly restored window, its clarity a stark contrast to the obscured vision of the past. But soon, she began to notice something unsettling. The reflection didn't always move in sync with her own actions. Sometimes it lingered a moment longer, or moved in an unsettling, jerky manner. It was as if the glass held a life of its own. One evening, while working on a new painting, Elena glanced up at the window and saw her reflection making grotesque, unnatural gestures. Her heart raced as she watched the figure in the glass distort its face into a nightmarish grin, its eyes following her with a malevolent glint. Panic gripped her, but she forced herself to remain calm, attributing the eerie behavior to stress and fatigue. Determined to understand what was happening, Elena began researching the studio's history. She visited the local library and scoured old newspapers and records, piecing together fragments of the past. The more she learned, the more the story of the studio's previous owner, Marcellus Greaves, emerged. Greaves, a once renowned artist, had fallen into madness before his untimely death. Rumors suggested that his final works were plagued by disturbing visions and that he had been driven to suicide by a malevolent force. Local legend spoke of a curse linked to Greaves's last masterpiece, a painting that had been rumored to capture a fragment of his tormented soul. The cracked window, Elena discovered, had once been a part of Greaves's studio, a portal through which his anguish had seeped into the world. As Elena delved deeper, the manifestations grew more intense. The reflection in the window began to take on a life of its own, moving independently and making increasingly disturbing gestures. Elena could hear whispers emanating from the glass, voices that seemed to echo Greaves's final, desperate pleas. Desperate to escape the grip of the phantom reflection, Elena sought the help of a local historian, Dr. Edgar Halloway, who specialized in the occult and the supernatural. Dr. Halloway confirmed the dark history of the window and warned Elena that she was dealing with a powerful entity trapped within the glass. He explained that Greaves' spirit, consumed by his own madness, had become a vengeful force, seeking to ensnare others in his torment. Armed with this knowledge, Elena prepared for a final confrontation. She set up a series of protective wards around the studio and performed rituals to exorcise the malevolent spirit from the window. The studio was filled with an oppressive energy as the reflection in the glass became a swirling vortex of rage and despair. The climax of the confrontation was a chaotic blend of terror and revelation. Elena faced the phantom reflection as it took on a monstrous, otherworldly form, its presence overwhelming and malevolent. In a desperate struggle, Elena recited ancient incantations and fought to break the entity's hold on the glass. The battle was fierce, with the very fabric of reality seeming to fray under the weight of the spirit's fury. In the aftermath, the studio was left in ruins, but the oppressive weight of the phantom reflection had been lifted. Elena emerged from the ordeal changed, her artistic vision forever altered by the encounter with the supernatural. The window, now shattered and silent, stood as a haunting reminder of the darkness that had once lurked within. As Elena gazed out of the broken window, the city below seemed distant and unreal, a world forever altered by the shadows that had invaded her studio. The shattered reflection was gone, but the echoes of its presence lingered, a chilling reminder of the destructive power of unresolved anguish and the thin veil separating sanity from madness.
Thank you for watching this harrowing journey through reflections and shadows with Fear Files. If tonight's tales left you looking over your shoulder, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chilling stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if your reflection started acting on its own? Until next time, remember, the things that haunt us are often the ones we can't see. Stay vigilant and sleep tight, if you can.